Staying consistent, I move with the clock. I'm in the zone, I'm not casting a stone. I'm finna stand on a rock, firm foundation. I got that dog in me, like 101 Dalmatian. I got girl with me, so I knew that I'm still finna make it. I'm still finna take it. I hopped in the ring and I'm still going crazy. I cut off this shit like I just got a taper. I walk in the storm and then God gave me favor. I'm still going forward. I just had to lock in the Lord. I knew that I'm finna make it. Doing my old self, he got deported. Shout out to the king and I'm finna take
Let's get it.
There we go. Welcome everyone to the SchuZ Show. I hope you guys all had an incredible weekend. I know we've got a lot of topics to get into today as I go through tonight's show. But as I just said, it is tonight's show, a different time than usual. I'll be back on the normal schedule by Thursday, but today we just happened to work out best to be able to do it tonight. So let's get right into it today. There's a lot of topics. We have the outline. I'm not going to have any guests on the show tonight, but that doesn't change anything in terms of what's going to happen tonight, because there are the three main topics we're going to get into today. We're going to have eternal echoes. We're going to break down the verse of the day and get into that discussion today. Then I'm going to go into Hardwood realities, and we're going to talk some basketball talk. Then I'm going to wrap up the entire show with combat currents, where I'll be unmasking combat currents of today's fight world. And there's a lot of stuff to get into after a massive weekend in the fighting world. So I'm excited for you guys all to be joining me today. I hope you guys are having a great Monday as well. But today we're going to get into, to start the show off with the verse of the day. And that verse of the day is Proverbs chapter 15, verse 26. And it reads this: "The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord, but the words of the pure are pleasant words." So I'm not sure if I've said this before, but what I like to do is I like to go through the word of God. Typically it is a chapter per night. Now I'm going through Proverbs currently. And what I'll do is I'll read a bit of the word. And like I said, typically it's a whole chapter of the word. And then I utilize commentaries provided by David Guzik. I really love what he brings and how he takes a lot of different commentators and brings them together. But while I'm going through Proverbs, I really have narrowed it down. I'm doing 3 verses a night, and then I break down each one of those verses. And there's a lot to break down in each one of these verses, because Proverbs is full of wisdom, full of guidance on how to live life. And every single one you could honestly have a discussion, talk about. This one stuck out to me though. And it's, like I said, Proverbs chapter 15, verse 26, and it's about the thoughts of the wicked. And wicked can ultimately mean anybody that's sinful. We all have sinful past. And so that's what I really want to break down today, is the sinful thoughts of us. And this was part of the David Guzik commentary, and one of the people he cited from was Derek Kidner. And this really gives you guys a different perspective on this verse. And what he said was this: thoughts. And the first line means plans. And the contrasted language of the second line emphasizes the fact that such plans are hateful to God even before they issue in words or deeds. And as like I said, that's from Derek Kidner. Our thoughts, before they ever come into fruition, can be considered and are sinful to God. It's not just the action that gets carried out. And when I just started reading about this and thinking about the mind, I was going all over the place in terms of so many different things I could discuss with you guys today. Because quite frankly, the mind is very, very complex. And I believe that we don't even have the capabilities of fully understanding the comprehension and understanding the complexities of the brain. And so there's so much throughout the word of God in regards to the brain, the mind, the power that we possibly can have if we utilize the brain appropriately and according to God's will and power. But I really want to emphasize and just stick today to our sinful thoughts and making sure that our mind is set upon God. And what came to mind as I started brainstorming about what I'm going to talk to you guys about today was this aspect. I started realizing that how many of us, when we think of God, and him enforcing the laws and what he wants us to live and the balance of good and evil, how many of us start to almost perceive God in the light of the mortal human mindsets? What I mean by that, how many of us almost start to think that God is just a police officer, is just somebody that's enforcing the law, but if the cop's not watching, you might be able to get away with something. Or maybe you can push the bounds of that law by a couple miles per hour. Or maybe you could even say, well, I look at the bounds of the American law, let's use for an example, and there are some laws that if you've broken, you're going to have a much more significant punishment, and in the eyes of the world will be a more significant or a quote-unquote worse person. But if I only do a little bit less than that person, then I'm not as bad as that person. And I thought, well, I think there's a lot of us, and I could include myself in that at least at some point in time or another, we start to think, just how often is it that when we look at the word of God, we start to think of God as a mortal human being that is carrying out the law of the land? Well, that's not the case at all. In fact, actually, God is not going to just look at what the actions are. He knows all things. He sees all things. He knows even what your thoughts are. And I really wanted to debate whether or not I was going to share this next piece of scripture, because this is a beautiful piece of scripture, which I'm about ready to read to you guys. But I was thinking about it and I said, well, this is a little bit long. However, this is a beautiful psalm. And it is a psalm that will, yes, completely back up what I'm talking about right now. But I think also there's going to be some people that might be listening to this at one point or another and might just need some assurance of the power of God. Might just need some assurance that not only is it, in a sense, you could say, well, yeah, I've got to live to a higher standard because of the fact that I want to live like Jesus and he sees everything I do, but also the fact that God is by your side at all times. He will never leave you, nor will he forsake you. He loves you more than you could ever fathom or imagine, and there will never, ever, ever be a point in your life where God is not by your side. He does not see or is there to comfort you. And so therefore I said, you know what? Let's just read Psalm chapter 139 today, because I want people to be able to hear this from the context of, yes, God's going to see everything, but at the same time, yes, God is going to see everything and he's right there by your side. So with that being said, let's get to Psalms chapter 139. Lord, you have examined me and know all about me. You know when I sit down and when I get up. You know my thoughts before I think them. You know where I go and where I lie down. You know everything I do. Lord, even before I say a word, you already know it. You are all around me, in front and in back. You have put your hand on me. Your knowledge is amazing to me. It is more. Your knowledge is amazing to me. It is more than I can understand. Where can I go to get away from your spirit? Where can I run from you? If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I lie down in the grave, you are there. If I rise with the sun in the east and settle in the west beyond the sea, even there you would guide me. With your right hand, you would hold me. I could say, the darkness will hide me. Let the light around me turn into night. But even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as light as the day. Darkness and light are the same to you. You made my whole being. You formed me in my mother's womb. I praise you because you made me in an amazing and wonderful way. What you have done is wonderful. I know this very well. You saw my bones being formed as I took shape in my mother's body. When I was put together there, you saw my body as it was formed. All the days planned for me were written in your book before I was 1 day old. God, your thoughts are precious to me. They are so many. If I could count them, they would be more than all the grains of sand. When I wake up, I am still with you. God, I wish you would kill the wicked. Get away from me, you murderers. They say evil things about you. Your enemies use your name thoughtlessly. Lord, I hate those who hate you. I hate those who rise up against you. I feel only hate for them. They are my enemies. God, examine me and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any bad thing in me. Lead me on the road to everlasting. I know in the midst of that, there's a little couple verses at the very end, and I wanted to discuss that part real quickly. When we're reading through this, and this is written by David most likely, we see that there's this sense of him understanding that God is by his side at all times. He sees all things, he knows all things, and as he gets to become more and more like Jesus, at that point, God, obviously the same thing, but at that point, he's not fully aware of Jesus. But we see this understanding that as he gets more and more comfortable, and he recognizes the power of being in a righteous and pure light, of being alongside the light and hand of God, that he starts to understand the concept that is talked about throughout the Word of God, that you end up hating the sin, you hate the evil, and you can see that shift in the mindset. And then he ends it with this verse that I love. See if there is any bad thing in me. Lead me on the road to everlasting life. See if there is any bad thing in me, not outside of me, not my actions in which I have now conducted or carried out, but actions that are within my thoughts, that are within my heart, that I've been drawn up and I have thought and pondered, but the world may not know about, but yet I am well aware of. So yes, if that answers your question, yes, God does know every sin that we make, and that includes the sins of our minds and our thoughts. And I know this is also a very controversial thing in one aspect that gets heavily debated, and a lot of people say, well, okay, why even try? You're telling me that God already knows what I'm going to do. I know that full well. God is well aware of what's going to happen. So why even try? Well, here's the truth. When we talk about God's power, he decided to partially limit himself and his power to the extent that we would then be able to have the right of free will. He wanted us not to just be forced creation, but to be relational and to be able to utilize free will to choose God, or ultimately choose the way that leads to death. Now, God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and he is omnipresent, meaning that he is all places at all times, and he's not bound by time. So he is both in the past, the present, and the future. Therefore, he knows what will happen, but he's not determining what will happen. He knows what your thoughts will be because he sees and knows it, but he allows you and I to choose which path we want to follow. So we must make the decisions as humans to pursue him. And people will say, well, why is it then that we even have within us the desire to sin, to do things that are not right? And once again, that goes to free will. But people will say, if everything is just so good and the word of God is the right way to live and it's the perfect way and that's the best way to live life, well, why would we not just all automatically do that? That's a great question. I would turn that around then and ask you, well, why is it that we as humans do so many things that we know are bad for us? Unhealthy, harmful things that we decide to pursue, whether we eat them, we smoke, we do things that are going to be destructive to the body, and yet we do that. And we are full well aware of what they're going to do. It's that we are confused. We are messed up. We have had our minds manipulated and screwed up over time due to sin, that we have now decided to say, you know what, let's just risk some things for a little bit. Let's risk whether or not I want to pursue God. And so that's where we stand today. And so, yes, we have the ability for free will. And that's why there's such an emphasis, especially in the New Testament, we read about this, about the thoughts that we must guard our thoughts, as sin does not just start in the act. It doesn't just come out of us and just is what it is. The sins are rooted within us, and it starts in the heart and mind. You can read this in Matthew chapter 12, Matthew chapter 15, James chapter 1, and others. And this is a verse that I've learned more and more and studied over time, and I feel like I've just recently I even took a new approach to it. And so I want to break this down to you. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 5 reads this: we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. That's what we're called to do. Now, are we going to be perfect? Absolutely not. But this understanding of literally taking captive of every single thought, the second something just a microfiber temptation within your brain decides to turn and flip the switch, and a certain lustful thought, a certain a sinful desire, a certain thing that's ungodly or unrighteous just clicks into our mind, that we are called to then remove that self from us, reflect on that, and take captive of it, and make sure we glorify God. And I think that's something that gets confused in today's world quite often, because that every thought, that every perception gets contorted a little bit, because a lot of people want to say, well, I can't do this for a little bit of time. I can't listen to this. I can't watch this. I can't see this. Well, the fact is that I'd be lying if I sat here right now and said, well, no, it says every thought. And when we are listening to something, when we are seeing something, when we are thinking something, all these aspects are blessings from God in which we are utilizing the mind. These all utilize the mind. The mind is necessary to make all these functions work properly, and these will permeate the brain. And therefore, they come to our thoughts, and our thoughts are then becoming sinful and filled with things that are of this world. And that's not what we're called to do. Every single thought means every thought. Not sometimes, or it's not a big deal sometimes to do this or that, but every thought. And what I said a couple of seconds ago was I've understood this verse more and more and studied it more and more. And just recently, I got another approach to it, because for a long time I said, okay, so I got the point. When I have a sinful thought, let it be gone, remove it from my life. But put my mind on God. Well, what do I just think of God? And we get clarification here now, and it's in Jude chapter 1, verse 21, where it discusses that no, what we're setting our mind actually on is supposed to be the love that God has for us. Instead of that thought of a sinful pursuit that we could so maybe be inspired to pursue, it's no, I don't want that. That leads to death, and that actually separates me from the love of God to a certain extent. His love will always be there, but I'm turning my back to it, not allowing myself to fully accept and embrace it. But what I'm actually doing is I'm going to set my mind on God's love for me, the love that he has set for me to be able to have an amazing journey with him on earth. Obviously, ups and downs, don't get that twisted, but it gets to be a journey alongside his calling for us. And we get to live and walk in a journey alongside God. And there's not many things you could say is better than that. And so when this verse in the scripture talks about setting your mind on God, it is actually setting your mind on the love that God has for you. And when you begin to think how much God loves you, and you start to reflect and remember the goodness of God and what he has done for you in your life, immediately I found that your mind starts to perceive what is going on in a whole nother perspective. You decide that other way I don't even entertain that. I'm just not interested in that, because I want to follow God, and it's a much better lifestyle being able to do that. So when we are supposed to fully surrender to God and allow him to control our mind, that is when we get to experience those great things. And so Colossians 3 verse 8 then reads this, and this is what happens because we're supposed to surrender to God, and the change will then eventually occur. And so Colossians chapter 3 verse 8 reads this, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these. Now, real quickly, I'm going to pause here for a second. That's going to list some couple things off right now. I think we can all be accountable to a certain extent here and realize that we probably fall in line with at least one, two, or many, maybe even all of these aspects that can be listed off right here, all right? Anger, rage, malice, slander, filthy language from your lips. Rid yourselves of all these things. And so you might ask, well, all right, I got it. I guess I see the word that God's trying to teach me right now. I got to get rid of some of these bad things. Well, guess what? I'm just going to let go of it and not do it anymore. That's not really how it goes down. And I'll be self-explanatory on that and be 100% just on my aspect. I know for a fact that I've gone through many different sins throughout my lifetime, and it does not work to just say, I'm just going to be done with it right now to that extent. No, it didn't work that way for me. What I need to do is realize, okay, I cannot do this alone. I need God's power. I'm going to surrender to you. I choose you, God. I'm going to pursue you. I'm going to stay in the word. I'm going to follow you. I'm going to give you my life. And I'm going to need that power of yours to help me get through these things. And so it won't be overnight. I've talked about other things before when it comes to music. It took me a year and a half to get that out of my life, to get the secular music out. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It takes time to fully allow God to change you from the inside out, because we don't want to trust right away. It takes time to grow that faith and trust. And I still got so much room to grow my faith and trust. But that, friends, is what we are called to do. And as we allow God to continue to work in and through us and change us by the Spirit of him, he will grow up that power within us to be able to have the strength of God and him working in and through us to be able to overcome these things. And so, no, it is not just you. It is allowing God to work in and through you to transition you into the man or woman that he's called you to become and be. And when we do this, the Spirit of God comes upon us and begins to change us from the inside out, allowing us to carry out the word of God. I said in the beginning, David Guzik, he discusses this scripture when I was reading it and breaking it down the other night. And he had a quote I want to read to you guys about this verse. The words of the pure are pleasant. Solomon knew that a person's thoughts would be ultimately revealed by their words. God hears the words of the pure and is pleased, contrasting with the thoughts of the wicked. At the end of the day, we want to become more and more in the image and likeness of Jesus. That is our job as Christians, is what we want to accomplish and carry out in our lives. He is the one who was perfect. He was the one that was able to keep his mind pure, even though he went through the same temptations in which we face in our lives. We must look to him and keep our minds strong and set upon heavenly things so that we can carry out this scripture, which is the verse of the day. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 26. The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord, but the words of the pure are pleasant words. When the mind is right and we are led by the Spirit of God, God knows the actions, the plans, the words will be righteous and pure. And that is why when we have the contrast in here in this verse, we can swap it from the thoughts of the wicked are abomination. God knows the thoughts and knows what it's going to result in the future. And he doesn't even go to the thoughts for the righteous person, the person that is set apart and living according to God's word, because he goes right to it. The words of the pure are pleasant. The action will then be pleasant. He knows that if it's already established in the righteous person, if he's already pursuing God, then the action, which is a word, that would be the action people then hear out, will be pure. And folks, that's why it is important. Let our minds be controlled by God, set upon heavenly things, on things above, on King Jesus, as he is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Let our minds be fully embraced by the power of God, and then be able to live a pure lifestyle that he's called us to. It will be for the better. I promise you guys that. We get confused so often about whether or not it's going to be worth it. Will we stand out? Will it not be exactly how God wants us to be? Is it going to be a little bit awkward? Maybe. But I promise you that once you fully do it, it won't happen overnight, but once you fully commit to God, your mind will never feel better. It's going to be pure. It's going to feel the power of God being able to work in and through you. And you'll be able to live out the life that God has called you to. So once again, Proverbs chapter 15, verse 26, the thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord, but the words of the pure are pleasant words. Folks, guard your minds. Keep your minds strong. And in and through the power of God, let your actions then display the likeness of Jesus. I'll see you guys after this break as you guys are able to meditate and think on what I just discussed here. And I'm excited to see you guys in a few minutes. All right, God bless you guys. From the moment I was born, a ball was in my hands and a deep passion for sports was ignited. My dream was to play the game for as long as possible, but God had other plans. After battling with severe illnesses caused by black mold poisoning for nearly 4 years, I made the difficult decision to let go of my on-court dreams heading into my junior year of high school. However, I was determined to have one last victorious moment as an athlete, and that was achieved on February 9th, 2019, when I ran a marathon at the age of 16. That night, as I took a recovery Epsom salt bath, I felt God place on my heart the idea to start a podcast. Although I didn't know where to begin, the first episode of SchuZ Views dropped on March 11th, 2019. Over the next 1,183 days, more than 600,000 people tuned into 1,056 interviews. Then, on June 6, 2022, my final interview for over a year was released featuring Jameer Young.
I never once thought that I'd be off the air for over a year. But the truth is, there was something missing in me. At first, I thought creating a website would help fill that void, so I went and put together SchuZ.net, but nothing changed. Throughout the next month, I continued searching for answers, and eventually, God worked in the only way that would have gotten my attention at that point in time. Through something work-related. By the end of July 2022, my parents blessed me with the opportunity to build a studio. However, before breaking ground, the real change began. On August 3rd, 2022, my life changed forever. Once again, I happened to be taking a bath late into the night, and suddenly, an indescribable feeling came upon me. It was a profound urge to open up my Bible and read. I turned to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and since that night, not a single day has passed without me spending time in the Word. You see, what was missing all along was Jesus. On August 6th, my dad and I began to lay the foundation for the next chapter of my career. Simultaneously, the foundation of who I was created to be was also being laid. Over the years, I had lost sight of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I knew of God, but I didn't know Him, and I certainly was not following or living like Him. But day by day, the new me began to take shape. My former self's sole priority faded away, and I began to live out the acronym I often talked about, FJTFOE. It stands for First Jesus, then Family Over Everything. God became my everything, and He transformed me entirely. He helped me rediscover my love for family, running, lifting, playing basketball, giving back, the church, and most importantly, Him. This journey began with a craving to nourish my old identity, but God's hand was always in control, rapidly shaping my new identity. As God transformed me, He also grew my relationship with every member of my family. Together they stood by me and contributed to the person I am today. Through it all, Ephesians chapter 3 verse 20 manifested its truth in my life. The blessings I received far exceeded anything I could have imagined. The truth is that God's hand has always been there, but now I'm committed to following His path. Although I may look different, and my heart has undergone a profound change, I am truly blessed to announce the beginning of a new chapter. Starting July 24th, I will be launching my new show, the SchuZ Show, which will air on my YouTube channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I can't wait for you guys to join me in this next chapter. I'll see you guys soon, and may God bless you all.
There is a funny aspect about you, and that's the fact that I don't think you necessarily even tried to, but there's been countless times in your brief NBA career already that you've made it.
Staying consistent, I move with the clock. I'm in the zone, I'm not casting a stone. I'm finna stand on a rock. Firm foundation, I got that dog in me, like 101 Dalmatian. I got girl with me, so I know that I'm still finna make it. I'm still finna take it. I hopped in the ring and I'm still going crazy. I cut off this thing like I just got a taper. I walk in the storm and then God gave me favor. I'm still going forward. I just had to lock in the Lord. I knew that I'm finna make it. Doing my old self, he got deported. Shout out to the king and I'm finna take it.
Welcome back, everyone, to the late night edition of the SchuZ Show tonight. The second topic we're going to get into today is Hardwood realities, where the raw authenticity of the hardwood echoes truth. I alluded to this before. This is kind of the dead period of basketball. We're not going to have too much going on. Thankfully, we have the Olympics going on. But August, first couple weeks of September is kind of the dead period of basketball. So I'm going to have a lot of guys on the show in the next couple of weeks because this is kind of their off time. However, topic-wise, we don't have a lot. But there are two things that caught my eye that I wanted to get into with you guys today. The first aspect is, I know there's been a lot of confusion when we see this 3-on-3 USA men's basketball team that, to put it frankly, has been garbage. There's no other excuse to talk about this, but a lot of people are looking at this team and they say, we know Jimmer Fredette. Obviously, how can anyone forget that March Madness run? But this isn't an NBA level roster. This is by far not even comparably the top 100 teams you could possibly put together, if not more. So why is this the case? Well, Brian Windhurst talked about this earlier on the Pat McAfee show, and I'm glad he brought this up because I guess a lot of people were not familiar with the qualification process. So the way all sports work for the Olympics, and each one varies and is different, is that there is a qualification process to be able to get into the Olympics. Each one varies, each one's a little bit different. For the men's basketball team, in case you did not know it, there actually are qualification teams that we send out throughout the year to go play that are based of guys that are primarily former NBA guys, and they go out and they'll play in a weekend tournament, a week-long tournament, whatever it might be, during the NBA season. Now, that is allowed because that is a country's points in a certain system. I'm not going to go into the exact specifics here, but you essentially accumulate enough points to different events and tournaments where then you qualify, and that team is good enough to get us to qualify for the World Cups and for the Olympics and whatnot. So therefore, they allow then the rules to then put together whatever team you want because your nation's represented. You then build the team you want to put together for that. And the emphasis of the 5-on-5, normal basketball games is to make it the best of the best. That's the same situation why all these guys, why Giannis can play with Greece, Jokic with Serbia, the list goes on. So that is allowed for that level of basketball. Now, the rules for the 3-on-3 basketball is actually different than that. For 3-on-3 basketball, that team you put together and form, that has to be the team that you primarily are playing with throughout the year competition to qualify for then the Olympic tournament. And that's what we see the situation, because you're playing games in the winter and at seasons and at points during the NBA season, which obviously you can't go ask guys to get an excuse to go play mid-season. It just wouldn't work. Doesn't make sense. They wouldn't really want to do that either. And so, quite frankly, it does not work. And the same situation applies to your top college players. They would not be able to go and do so either because they're in college season. Could you maybe get them once again? Maybe, but then you're missing season. It's a whole complex issue that wouldn't make any sense. It's not going to happen. So you have to get a certain amount of guys to buy into this team, be committed, be a part of this team. And those are the core guys that help get this team all the way to qualifying to the Olympics and being able to play. So there is a lot of respect that we need to give them from that aspect. The commitment to dedicate themselves to the sport, to 3-on-3 basketball, to represent the country. It just is not the highest quality product. And it's been intentionally designed by that. FIBA put the rules into play that it has to be those guys that's been working for the tournament and throughout this entire expedition building up process, that it has to be those guys playing in the Olympic Games. And their reasoning for that was so that this doesn't become a U.S. dominated sport and event as it has for the 5-on-5 and other events. Is it fair? Does it make a lot of sense? Honestly, I don't think so. I want the best of the best. I see where they're coming at. They want globalization of the game of basketball. They want globalization of this new 3-on-3 brand of basketball. And, does things change in the future? Who knows? Obviously, for the first however many Olympics, you couldn't have NBA players playing in the main basketball one. That changed with the Dream Team in 92. Will this happen one day? I don't know. But then you look at the women's side, and obviously that worked out a little bit better. The scheduling happens. The women's NBA season is shorter. Also, the tournaments didn't fall during the duration of the season. So you had a team that was able to be put together. They could go out there and win a bronze that featured some women's NBA players. Cameron Brink would have been a part of that. Obviously, she tore her ACL. She's out. Wasn't able to compete in that. So 3-on-3 basketball is unique, but I just wanted to give clarification on that aspect, because I know so many people said, what the heck was this team we saw out there? Well, that's the reasoning behind it. And I think, like I said, obviously was the team good? No, absolutely not. But do they deserve this respect for pretty much for dedicating themselves year round for this team to be able to just get to the stage of being in the Olympics? I think they deserve a lot of respect and credit for that. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about when in regards to 3-on-3 basketball. The other basketball topic I want to get into today is something that I've been considering whether or not I go into or not. And I decided today is going to be the day, because there's not a lot of basketball topics to get into. And what that is in regards to this entire Chicago Bulls situation going on right now. The truth is, I'm somebody that does not like to speak on things until there's enough facts present. I don't like opinions. I don't like sharing them for the most part. I like to give facts of what things are. And in this situation, I can't really give a lot of facts, and that's the problem with this whole situation. We have zero clarity. I don't know if anybody knows what's going on with the Chicago Bulls right now, because they made a move early, and we knew it was time, right? We knew that we missed the opportunity to see what a potential Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, Vucevic, Patrick Williams, DeMar DeRozan, that whole core group that we saw that was playing at a high level for a long time there until Lonzo got hurt. We knew that era was coming to conclusion. Maybe Lonzo's back, maybe not. We don't know, but it's been multiple years since he's played. And so it's time to blow it up. And so I love the move they made it to begin with. The Josh Giddey addition, loved it. I think that was great. They need to start finding ways to get young talent assembled to build for the future. And so that was a great start to the offseason. And now we get to this point, and it's like, okay, well, all right, Caruso's gone, it's a good player, but makes sense. DeMar's gone, great. So we're rebuilding, and then you look at the roster, and well, Zach LaVine, he's still there. Vucevic, he's also still on that roster. What is going on here? And that's the problem here. And we hear rumors and reports that they're still attempting to trade them. And I asked, well, Zach LaVine is an all-star player. How is this so difficult to trade him? And that's where the clarity is not certain here. We don't know what is all going on. We've heard leaked rumors. We've heard things on both parties coming out. We've heard thoughts and reasons for everything going on. But quite frankly, we don't know the truth. I don't know if it's the Bulls are setting such a high level of a package that's necessary for Zach LaVine that pretty much every team's saying, I don't want this. But if that's the case, if you're the Chicago Bulls, you're going to run this team out there, and what are you going to do? 10th seed maybe? I don't know. Like, this is not a team that we really want to watch unless Lonzo's back to better than he was beforehand, which I hope happens. But just keeping it reality-wise, he's been out for multiple years. It's going to be very, very tough, and it probably will take at least a year to get himself back fully. So I don't even know what it's going to look like. So this Chicago Bulls team, it's one of the most confusing rosters to look at top to bottom because they have young guys. I would love to see them get more experience. I just talked about Josh Giddey. I would love to see what he's got. We had a massive breakout season with Kobe White. Keeping him definitely. I'm not saying do not trade him. I like to see what Julian Phillips can do. Dalen Terry, we saw him grow a little bit last season. What is he capable of doing with a larger role? There's a lot of these young guys that are just not able to grow and develop because you have guys that are established veterans on the team. And these established veterans, while they are good players, they're not built to contend to any extent. And so what I look at with this team is, well, what moves can we possibly see the Chicago Bulls make? And I don't even know if the packages will be that large. It appears to me that they're not going to, because if there was a large package, I think Vucevic and LaVine would both be gone, long gone, in fact, from the Chicago Bulls. So I'm not sure what they're going to get, and that's where it gets complex and confusing, because when a lot of these teams tear down these, competitive playoff, you want to call them contender teams, is that they're smart and they ship out the guys in the last couple of years of the deal. They get draft picks, they get assets to get young guys back. What they really did with Josh Giddey for Caruso was a perfect move, exactly what I'm talking about here. And that's why I'm confused why I can't get something similar for LaVine and Vucevic. But we saw that with, we're not going to list the name, but Brooklyn Nets recently. We saw that with Thunder. We saw that with the Houston Rockets. The Boston Celtics, however many years ago. It's a continuous thing. You got to get assets back. And that's where I see this rebuild gets a little bit confusing and complex here, which almost makes me think, is this why the Bulls are so high on getting stuff back for LaVine and Vucevic? Because if they don't get a lot back, they could be really in the bottom feeders of the NBA for quite a while. Because just getting, one hit, and if that pans out, great. If not, then you got to wait a whole other year to get another guy, and only having one draft pick is going to be tough. Matas is also the young guy. I forgot to mention him with the young court earlier. He's a guy I like to see. Patrick Williams is fine keeping there as well. But if you're just going to have this veteran type roster formation here, I don't like what the Chicago Bulls have set for the season. Like I said, can they maybe get into the playing game? Maybe. But that makes no sense. It's time to move on from Zach LaVine. It's time to move on from Nikola Vucevic and find another package deal where you can get them gone. And preferably you get draft picks, you get young assets, you get something. But at the very bare minimum, you got to make sure this team is not going to be just a 10 seed. This is a very loaded upcoming draft. It is far better than what we just had this past year's draft. You've got a generational considerably talent in Cooper Flagg, as well as a lot of guys that are also going to be vying for that top couple picks in the draft as well. This is a draft that you could land a franchise cornerstone piece. And if you're the Chicago Bulls, you're looking at that and you say, you know what? We have to make sure that we get ourselves in the best position to draft one of those guys, because this is not a team that's going to go anywhere else. We see what they're capable of. Bearing a massive breakout season from somebody else and everybody being healthy, this team is not going to contend or compete at all this year. It's time to break this team up, and it's time to get the moves over with so you can really start saying, hey, young guys, here's the team. What do you guys got? Who can we start building around? Who are some cornerstone pieces? Who are the guys that we're really going to consider franchise cornerstones? You could hypothetically say right now Kobe White, right? You could say maybe Josh Giddey has a chance to get to that point. But at the same time, they're hindered from that positioning and the opportunity because of the fact that you have guys in place right now in Zach LaVine and Vucevic, who obviously, if they're there, they're the veterans, they're established, they've both been all-stars in their careers. They automatically will have the spotlight on them. They're automatically the top two guys there, and it holds back these young guys. So it is time to move on for the Chicago Bulls. They've got to figure out a package deal to get these guys uprooted up on out of this team. hopefully get some kind of assets. But regardless of what happens, they got to get these two guys traded before training camp happens so that they can move forward with this roster now, where you will have a young Chicago Bulls roster throughout this next season, where we're evaluating who are our core pieces, who are the guys that we're going to build around, and who are guys that we can really just add on to this team and prepare to potentially land that cornerstone piece in the 2025 NBA draft. So that's what the Chicago Bulls have to do. Will they do it? I honestly have no idea, because like I said, this is a situation that has pretty much zero clarity. I have no idea. Nobody knows exactly the details going on behind the scenes right now, but moves must be made in Chicago. This is not a team that's going to compete. It's a very weird built team. I think it's the weirdest built team in the NBA at this moment, and we got to see those two guys dealt before the offseason, before the training camp starts. So that's what I've got for you guys today on Hardwood Realities, where the raw authenticity of the Hardwood echoes truth. I'm going to go back to one quick break, and then we'll wrap up this show with the last segment of the day, Combat Currents. I'll see you guys in a few minutes. God bless you guys.
Staying consistent, I move with the clock. I'm in the zone, I'm not casting a stone. I'm finna stand on a rock, firm foundation. I got that dog in me, like 101 Dalmatian. I got girl with me, so I know that I'm still finna make it. I'm still finna take it. I hopped in the ring and I'm still going crazy. I cut off this sin like I just got a taper. I walk in the storm and then God gave me favor. I'm still going forward. I just had to lock in the Lord. I knew that I'm finna make it. Doing my old self, he got deported. Shout out to the king and I'm finna take it.
Welcome back to the SchuZ Show. Today is the late night edition of the SchuZ Show, which is definitely a very exciting thing. And we're going to be able to get into a lot of topics right now. I've got a lot of stuff to get into today in this segment this is something that I hyped up for a while. This was a segment that I talked about last week on Thursday's show about just how big this past weekend's show was going to be. And we saw that Riyadh season card in LA this past week, and it was a big show. It was gigantic. Tons of big fights were happening, and I'm going to break it down. So this might be a little lengthy of a segment because I got a lot to spew today. So I got to start with the main event from that night. Terrence Crawford, Israel Madrimov. Terrence Crawford, it goes the distance. Terrence Crawford wins by decision, and he officially becomes the WBA super welterweight world title holder. My apologies on that part. Before I break down the fight, though, must I give some credit to Terrence Bud Crawford. He is now 41-0 over his career, 31 KOs. He is a 2-weight undisputed world champion. He is a 3-weight Ring Magazine champion, and he is a 4-weight world champion. This is one of the greatest fighters we've seen. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is one of one. This era, he's one of the greatest of this era. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's an all-time great. That being said, this past weekend was a very interesting fight. And I want to go and break this down because there's a lot of different opinions on this fight, right? First of all, I want to say this. We look back, and I look back through some of the fight parts, and the broadcast team did not give Bud a lot of credit for the hits he was giving. The far more powerful hits was certainly provided by Bud Crawford in that fight. And when you rewatch it, I think Bud certainly definitely won the fight. I had no doubt about whether or not he won at the time, but I think he won it by a lot more than even maybe people thought right out the gate. But what I really want to get down into is there's a lot of debate whether or not A, Bud really won the fight, and C, by how much, and was this too much of a weight jump for him? And I want to address those two things. So, first of all, in regards to that, yes, Bud won the fight. He put on a masterclass. It was a great performance overall. No, didn't get the KO. Yes, the 11 fight KO streak came to conclusion. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't fight at this weight class. In fact, I think after watching that, Madrimov is a guy that I think was really, really overlooked going into this fight. I think a lot of people did not have the respect that he deserved. And we see now that I think he just might be the most elite 154 guy outside of Bud Crawford. Now, there's Jerome Boots Ennis. That's a guy I would like to honestly see him fight next. But I think Bud is just fine at 154. What I would like to say is this, though. We know the big rumor at hand right now. And everything, including what Turkey came out and said the other day, was, okay, we want Canelo next. Canelo's the fight to make. Canelo's what we want. Canelo's what we want to see. This, that, and the third. That was what we've been hearing, and Turkey made that very clear. If he won, that was going to happen. If he lost, Virgil Ortiz was most likely going to be the fight that was then going to merge and occur when everything went down and was said and stated. Well, we won the fight, so does it mean that the offer now is on the table for Canelo versus Bud Crawford? And to that, I say, if that is the fight, and that's genuinely what the fight is that Bud wants, who are we to say he doesn't deserve that fight? I just listed his resume. He deserves whatever Bud Crawford really wants. If Bud Crawford wants to go fight Canelo and move up multiple weight classes again to then go fight Canelo, let him do it. At the end of the day, yes, there could be a severe beating in that. Of course, it's boxing. Anything can go down. So obviously, it's always a risk. But in terms of a legacy standpoint, nobody's going to really, if he loses that fight, nobody's going to look at that fight and say, he's not good. He's just, he's going to have a legitimate excuse where people are going to look and say, okay, he was fighting up so much weight. There's weight classes for a reason. It is what it is. So it doesn't have that much to lose from that standpoint. From a health standpoint, obviously, there could be things that you lose there. But what I like to honestly see when I saw from that fight was, there's got to be a little bit that people look at and say, okay, well, maybe there was a little bit of weight jump. Was the weight jump just a little bit too much, too early, or whatnot? Does he maybe need to settle down 154 for a little bit? And like I said, it's up to Bud. He has the right to do whatever he wants. And of course, I still would watch Bud versus Canelo. That would be an enticing fight. But almost from my standpoint, I almost would say, I wouldn't mind seeing Bud do a fight at 154 one more time at least. And if he can go out there and dominate then okay, we know he's good and he's good to go. And I think that actually would be what happens, because we look at some of the other guys. Virgil Ortiz is a potential candidate to fight next, and you could have a rematch that could potentially happen. And you also have an option to go fight Jerome Boots Ennis. Those are three guys around that weight class that you could then go and say, okay, Bud, you fight this now, and we will do Canelo, mid-time next year, and you fight one of those other three, maybe December this year, maybe January, whatever the case may be of next year. And I think that honestly is what I would prefer to see happen. I wouldn't mind at all seeing him go fight Canelo, as I said. But if Bud decides to go forth and fight one of these guys and do one more at 154, just kind of get his legs underneath him, see if he still got it, see if that truly is something he can be dominant at. And if he goes out there and runs through somebody, then we know the answer is straightforward. Let him go fight Canelo. He's ready for it. But I think just getting one more fight underneath his legs at 154 wouldn't be a bad idea whatsoever. And then the other option for him to fight is Canelo. So Bud Crawford, he is spectacular. I just listed off his resume. He is one of a kind. And speaking of Canelo, there was a side note that we saw today that his trainer / manager came out and he talked about saying that they're also targeting a potential fight for Canelo to occur in December in Japan if he beats Edgar Berlanga on September 14th, which, fighting Japan, and that's not what Turkey suggested saying the next fight for Bud was going to be. And I did catch that point, because Turkey said it's going to either be at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, we said the biggest stadium in Las Vegas, that would be that one, or it's going to be in Saudi. So that obviously is not going to be in Japan. So I almost feel like the cards could be kind of getting set where we end up seeing Bud versus Canelo next year if all goes as planned, but we'll see what is happening there. However, at the very same time, I want to make sure that I give major respect and props to the winner of that fight, or the loser of that fight, in Israel Madrimov. If he didn't earn your respect that night, I don't know how that's possible. I think he had to earn the people's respect. He took on Bud Crawford, who was debatably the number one pound for pound fighter in the world, and he took him 12 rounds. He ended his 11-fight KO streak, and we see the photos now coming out of the results post-fight, and he took a pretty good beating that fight. We'll be 100% honest, right? He took a good beating that fight, and I think that goes to show his character. That goes to show what he's made of. He is not going to go down. Guys from that area of the world, we've seen that historically. Triple G is a guy that we can look back to. Their chins are made of steel. They don't fall. They don't go down. And the beating he took looked like he probably should have been knocked down one or two times, but he obviously didn't. He took him the distance, and it was a much more competitive fight than anybody had expected, I think, heading into that night. So in regards to him, I think that if Bud stays at 154, well, it might be unfortunate to do a rematch. How's he going to get those belts? However, if Bud does move up and he's on the back end of his career, Israel Madrimov still has a bright future, many, many more years ahead of him. Madrimov has a chance will be a champion once again at some weight class. He is going to be a great fight. And I alluded to a couple minutes ago. Honestly, seeing him versus Boots would be a more appealing fight. I would not mind that at all. I would actually like to see that fight and see who comes out of that fight. I think that would reveal a lot of things as well. But Israel Madrimov should have earned everybody's respect. He is legit. He is an incredible fighter. He had a good game plan. I think he blew the first few rounds of the fight. And had he won those and gone out of the gate fighting like he did the later rounds, it could have been a different story. Maybe I think Bud was going to win regardless, but that could have potentially happened. So like I said, I just want to give major props to Israel Madrimov. Incredible overall fight. It was a very, very technically sound, good fight. There is one thing I do want to say, and I mentioned this on the Thursday show. What Turkey's done for boxing is sensational. I'm not going to even judge or say anything about what he wants to do. Whatever he wants to do, he can do. He's changing the entire sport. He's making these mega cards. I think we can all admit, though, that maybe, just maybe, that the transition periods in between the fights was a little bit too long. And, even for the main event, the concert and all that was special. And I'm honestly not against that aspect. And the walkouts were unique and special. And for a mega fight of that caliber, I get it. But you had all the car giveaway, and that's a whole nother story. But the car giveaway aspect, the awards, all things that probably could have been done earlier in the night, could have been done, another time. But it is what it is. Like I said, I'm not going to be too critical of it. At the end of the day, we got one of the best boxing cards, if not the best boxing card in U.S. history. There's no way I'm going to sit up here and complain about what happened that night overall. I just think that maybe we could transition to make it smooth, kind of go flow a little bit better. Second co-main event fight. This, you could possibly say, could have been the upset of the year. We're going into a fight where I'm genuinely shocked. I, of course, said that Pitbull Cruz was going to win that fight, and I thought it was going to be done in a few rounds. Nobody saw that one happening. Rayo went out there and put on an absolute clinic. We know what Pitbull is going to do. Pitbull will be on the attack. He's going to be pushing forward the vast majority, if not the entire fight. He's going for the big hits. He's going for the kill over and over and over again. He doesn't back down. He keeps attacking you. That's a tough style to fight for a lot of guys. And, we've seen him lose. Tank beat him. We know that. But he doesn't really go down hard. So you've got to be technically sound and outsmart him in a way that most others have not been able to do. And we saw Rayo go out there, and he ends up becoming the WBA super lightweight world title holder now. He stole that entire belt away from Pitbull Cruz, and that fight was quite clear. And if I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't think that was even disputable. That was a fight that Rayo went out there and he earned that win. He earned that belt, and he put on a show. And I think he woke a lot of people up as well. I think when we look at how technically sound he was that fight, Pitbull landed a couple hits on him, but Rayo was in complete domination for the vast majority of that fight. It wasn't, not only did he dominate, but this was an upset. He was a clear-cut underdog, and he went out there. He looked like the champion throughout the entire fight. Pitbull just could not find his rhythm, could not get going. And, I know Pitbull obviously thought he won. The crowd thought so. But when you look back at the film, it really wasn't that disputable. And I think we look at this now, and we add another massive player into the super lightweight title champ and into the division now. Rhea was a guy we all looked at. He was a good fighter, but there was certainly a gap between maybe him and the other top echelons of that weight class. And as of now, it's like, okay, well, we have another player now. We've got a guy that has a legitimate chance to make some noise in this weight class. And he's another big time player. He's now holding a belt, and that means we can see another big fight. I'm excited for that because I think he is an excellent fighter. He is a very technically sound. He's a very good fighter, and he showed that he could persevere throughout 12 rounds of Pitbull cruising. There's not going to be a guy that's going to chase you more so than Pitbull. You could say on the attack, Tank is better because Tank is obviously he has much better footwork than Pitbull does. He's got a lot more power than Pitbull possesses, and Tank's more technically sound than Pitbull. However, just being on the pressure that over and over for 12 rounds is not an easy task to do, and for him to handle it as well as he did, he earned a lot of respect that night. Then we go to the next fight with the big boys. Andy Ruiz, Jarrell Miller. It was scored a majority draw. Was not a fan of that call at all. Jarrell Miller won that fight in my opinion. Here's what I'll say though. Jarrell Miller won the fight, but I felt there was more that Jarrell Miller could have done. I felt like I could just see that there was a little bit more tank gas left in that tank that he could have pushed through and made a statement. There was a lot of rounds early on where Ruiz was in clear control over Big Baby, but then when Jarrell Miller flipped the switch, he was on the complete control. But yet there was times where I was like, is this a round that he maybe lost? Even though you felt like he was in control and winning it, but he just didn't do it. It was a very weird fight to have how it occurred in some of those rounds. It was very hard to score some of those rounds. And so am I mad with the majority draw? No, but I do think Jarrell Miller won that fight. Then we see after the fight that Andy Ruiz ended up breaking his hand, so he's going to need surgery recovery. He's going to be out for a little while. But when he does return, I would not be opposed to seeing a rematch. I was surprised Andy Ruiz, you could see he got gassed out early, but he still did put up a good fight. He still had a good performance overall. And Jarrell Miller did look a lot better than he did back in December 23rd in the Riyadh fight in Saudi Arabia. So is that a fight I wouldn't mind seeing again? Absolutely not. They could run it back into a rematch, but it's not something I would per se say I want to have happen. I think both guys could go in their own direction. Both guys were okay. We can still do it. We can compete, and let's go find the next best fight for ourselves. Here's a topic I do want to get into, though, that I've got some thoughts on. This is the fourth fight of the main card, and that is Martin Bakole versus Jared Anderson. I'm going to call out the media as a whole on this one, and that does include myself. I thought Jared Anderson was going to win that fight. I thought he was going to win that quite clearly. Yeah, I could not have been more wrong there. And, what I started thinking was, okay, well, let me break down this fight first of all. We saw the highlights. Martin Bakole knocks him down in round one. Jared Anderson, we saw he's got grit. He's got that grit of a fighter in him. He did not back down. He kept coming at him. And, he lasts a few more rounds, and then round 5, it's over with. But major props from really staying in it. Martin Bakole was spectacular in that fight. He was absolutely sensational. It was an incredible fight. He did an incredible job. He made a statement. But here's what I want to say about Jared Anderson. I think that when we talk about USA heavyweight boxing, and USA boxing as a whole, let's be honest, there's been a drop-off from where it once was. And this is specifically in the heavyweight division. And there's countless reasons we could discuss as to why this occurs. But there is this massive gap and hole right now where we're trying to fill this void. It was once upon a time where the great heavyweights fighters were all from America. You might have an occasional guy here and there from other nations and countries, but we had the greats were right here in our nation. And it slowly disintegrated, and yet we had an era then of Deontay Wilder, where Wilder went out and he was one of the premier faces of boxing in general. He was a massive draw. He was spectacular. He was a champion, and so he held down the fort all by himself. And we were all saying, okay, it's fine. We got Wilder. It's not a big deal. It is what it is. Well, folks, bearing some miracle, as much as I love Deontay Wilder, my favorite fighter, the guy got me loving the sport of boxing, his career is probably done. In terms of at least being a top level contender and fighter, he should be over with. And so I think the American media almost overstated this aspect, saying, well, shoot, we know Wilder's not the case, and a couple of these other guys are older. And so who do we have to possibly place in this position of the spotlight of heavyweight fighting in America? Well, we have this young up-and-comer. He's 24 years old, Jared Anderson. He looks real good. He's got a bright future. Yeah, he's 24. Yeah, he's still almost a kid in a sense, because remember, the brain doesn't fully develop until you are 25 years old. You're not fully considered an adult by overall doctrine until you're 25 years old. That's when the brain actually fully is grown into yourself. So he's still not even at that point. He's still developing, growing as a man, as a person. He does not have a man body yet. He's not fully developed and grown in that aspect yet. And yet we said, okay, he's skilled, he's good in all these aspects. Well, he must be ready. And so people started ranking him inside the top 10 because he is American. He's a heavyweight. And well, what else do we have? Well, we saw what happened then. And he was the favorite heading into that fight. And yet we go in there and immediately we see the difference why boxing is not a sport in which you play. You play basketball, you play football, you play soccer, you play golf, you play these sports. You don't play boxing. You fight. That is what it is. It is a grown man sport. And especially as you move up the weight classes, it becomes more and more so a grown man sport. You don't have a lot of guys in the 20s even really contending or competing for the most part. It's the guys in the 30s and late 30s. Look at the champions. They're in the 35 plus, right? That's your prime for heavyweight boxers. And we looked at Jared Anderson and thought he could buck the system and be different. And at the same time, I think we looked at it and said, well, Jared Anderson, well, let's think back. Who was our last American great heavyweight? Oh, yeah, Deontay Wilder. Very similarly, Deontay Wilder was always the skinniest, thinnest, lightest, smallest fighter in the ring. Now, he was very tall, obviously, that aspect, sure. But we can't forget why he was able to be in that ring. Wilder could have weight cut and gone down to cruiserweight, maybe even light heavyweight. I doubt that. But you know, he obviously could have gone down a weight class. But he was heavyweight, and there was one reason for that. No, debatably, I believe so. We have not seen a man on this earth that has been recorded with as powerful, as dominant, and as lethal of a weapon as a fist, as a hand, than Deontay Wilder's hand was. That was a separating factor. That is why Deontay Wilder could go into fights and dominate and disintegrate guys the way he did, even though he was so much smaller than every guy he fought size-wise. And so I think a lot of us in America, self-included, thought, well, you know, we just had Deontay Wilder. Let's just throw him out there. He's got it. And obviously, he skipped the system. A lot of guys will go in a certain trajectory and, you know, work their ways up to this type of magnitude of a fight that Jared Anderson took part in this weekend. And, you know, Turkey gets involved and there's lots of money involved. And he takes this big opportunity. And you wouldn't want to pass that down. But he is 24 years old. And we saw the difference between a grown man in his prime versus a 24-year-old kid, basically. And, you know, Martin Bacolby made a statement, but it was not a pleasant and it was not a good fight overall. It was entertaining, sure, but I really want to say this about Jared Anderson, though. I don't want people to stand here now and just wipe him off the table and say he's over with. Is he a contender right now? Absolutely not. But he's 24 years old. Now, hopefully, we have to make sure, and obviously I hope that everything mentally is okay with him. Obviously, this is probably going to be a fight he's going to have to recover for a little bit. Those were some hard hits he took. He obviously got some damage in that fight. Let's just to put it lightly. You know, it's going to be a little bit of time until we see him back in the ring. It could be, you know, late this year, or maybe I'd say probably early next year we see him, most likely. But I don't want people to wipe him off and think he's just not relevant right now. He is 24 years old. There's not many guys at 24 that we see fighting at this magnitude stage at the heavyweight division. And so I still think he's going to be very, very good. Give him 3-4 years until let his body fully develop and grow. And I think we could have one of the premier fighters. I mean, he's all we got in America, if we're going to be honest. There's not another guy that we have in American heavyweight boxing that we can look at and say, you know, this guy's got it. He's what we got. He's the best we have at this point in time. And so I still think two young heavyweight boxers. I love Jared Anderson, Moses Toma. Those are the two guys that are really leading the future. And so I think we've got to be patient. He took a step up way too soon in this fight. But don't write him off yet. He is 24 years old. He's got plenty of time to reinsert himself into the elite company of other great fighters. He's going to be back in the heavyweight division eventually. He's got skill. We saw the talent and skill. He's got toughness. He's got grit to him. He's going to be able to be all right. It's just he's not ready right now. He's not ready to go fight those type of big boys at this point in time. but he's going to be all right. So don't write Jared Anderson off yet. He's got a bright future. It's way too early, just too big of a step up right now. He's going to be all right. Just let him develop over the next couple of years. Now, we got to talk about Martin Bakole, though. Martin Bakole walked into this fight as a guy that people consider, he's obviously a top 20 echelons heavyweight fighter. No one really put him in that top group and in that top contending group per se, but he's right there on the cusp of that top contending group. And we didn't know he was the underdog heading into this fight. He made a statement. He sat there and took Jared Anderson's punches as if nothing was happening to him. And then his punches, how else do you put it than saying they were dominant, they were destructive on Jared Anderson time and time again. And so when we look at Martin Bakole, he's officially arrived. Let that not be twisted right now. We have a new big-time player in the heavyweight division. He is a guy that's going to be a threat. I've said this a couple of times. The heavyweight division is tied up now for the next year or so. We're not going to have many belts opening up, okay? But there's a lot of big fights to make in the heavyweight division. It is stacked overall right now. And so I look at it and say, well, this guy's arrived. I want to see him next. He didn't take any damage at all, I don't think, in that fight. He can easily fight again in the next couple of months. We could see him back out there, and I think everybody wants to see him after that performance. And names that came to my mind, obviously, like I said, he's not getting AJ. He's not getting one of those guys yet. But Zhilei Zhang, I think that's the guy we could see. It could be a very rough fight, let's be honest there. Both are guys that are just going to sit there and wait for the big heavy hitter. It could be interesting, could not. Joe Joyce versus Zhang was a very interesting fight. And so we could obviously see those two have a good fight, but that's one fight I have on the table. Jarrell Miller, I just said Andy Ruiz, you could do the rematch there. Not sure if that is what it is. Not a bad rematch, but not something I prefer. But Jarrell Miller should be healthy right now. I could see those two fight. I would like to see that actually. Maybe even Hrgovic. I personally was not very impressed with him in his last fight. There was so much talk about him being this next dominant dude. And, Daniel Dubois just put in work on him. It was a brutal, quick in and out fight for Daniel Dubois. And so I think that Bakole maybe works there, but those are kind of three fights I have circled for him. But don't get it twisted. Martin Bakole, he has arrived and he is legit. So that's what I'm excited for. And going back to this other topic, I briefly touched up on it, but I said I do want to come back to it. And that is in regards to U.S. heavyweight division. In terms of all fighters, yeah, we have work to improve on in the American boxing ranks, but we still have a lot of good guys in other weight classes. But the primarily emphasis right now is on the heavyweight division. And, I said Jared Anderson, he's good. He's going to be fine in the future, but we got to wait some time. And so nobody's really coming out that is fully equipped and ready for a big stage at this point in time, bearing a last miracle of Deontay Wilder. And Jared should not be rushing another top fight. He needs to go back and work his way back up. Fight a guy. I could see something like Otto Wallin or someone like that. Guys. Wallin just came off a win recently, but obviously Wallin got pieced up by AJ Rowe pretty badly in the December 23rd fight. So you could see a fight like that, but just working his way back up. That's what Jared Anderson needs to do. And so what I have to ask then is, well, what are we going to do with the USA heavyweight division? That is our premier division. Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, George Foreman, Lennox Lewis. The list goes on. We have owned the heavyweight division since the beginning of time for the most part. That is no longer the case to any extent. We're not first. We're not second. We're not third. We don't have anybody ranked in that top echelon so that deserves to be in that top echelon. So guys, so what I have to ask now is, okay, what is going on in the U.S. heavyweight division right now? And there's a lot of things. One aspect is well, is it that we have so many other guys that are fighting that could be heavyweight fighters doing other sports? I think that probably is the primary thing. We talk about a lot of guys in the basketball world that there's so much money involved in basketball, the fame, everything. It's I don't want to say easy money, but you don't have to work your way up as you do in boxing. It's not as damaging on your body. It makes more sense to go down basketball. And why would you not? It's a much easier opportunity to get into basketball more from the time you're young and so on and so forth. That I think a lot of guys are just getting embraced into basketball. You could say our country overall has become a lot more softer from top to bottom in terms of people. That is certainly something you could throw in there as well. I do think primarily though, you look at, some football guys, but we're talking about heavyweights per se that can move around. There's some guys that you look at in the that are heavyweight caliber guys that play basketball that could certainly be interesting to see what they could do in the boxing ring. And I think that's where a lot of guys are going. But we're going to have to figure something out because right now it is not looking good for American heavyweight future. Jared Anderson is really all we got. There's nobody that we saw in the up-and-coming Olympics right now. We don't have many guys that's working their way up. we have a lot of older guys that's moving on now. And so that's got to be addressed ASAP. If you are the United States, we have to figure out what's going wrong and how we're going to build up these next great heavyweight fighters in America. Now, a couple of the fights I do want to talk about. David Morrell, he got the win, and he is the WBA regular light heavyweight belt, and he's now positioned himself to become the mandatory challenger for the Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol winner. I don't know exactly where he falls in this list. I would say I put David Morrell just below those two, and if we're going to have Benavidez in that group now, he's third. I said Morrell's fourth. But a good win, decent. The gap, though, in that division, that weight class is special, but we have one of the most hyped up fights we could ever ask for, and maybe boxing history in regards to, two guys, the same weight class. Nobody's moving up or down weight class to make this fight work. It's not a catch weight. It is two guys, natural bodies, fighting in their weight class that just happen to be two of the elite fighters of the world in Beterbiev versus Bivol. That comes up in a couple months. That's going to be one of the biggest fights ever. And those two guys are so dominant, that's hard to imagine them really losing to anybody else. Now, with Benavidez going into the group, that's obviously enticing. I want to see him fight the loser or the winner of the Bivol Beterbiev fight. But David Morrell has certainly positioned himself, and he's put himself now possibly too, because Beterbiev and Bivol, they're going to fight their fight in the end of the year. And likely there's going to be a rematch, which will happen, probably March-ish of next year, I'd say, March, April maybe. And so you're waiting a little bit. And so what I'd like to see is, can we get Benavidez versus David Morrell? And therefore, you officially know exactly who's going to be the fighter of the winner of the Beterbiev Bivol match. So that's what I like to see. But the other last fight I want to touch up on from this weekend, Andy Cruz, he stopped Moran in round 7. Tough. He had a tough little battle there. But once again, gets another KO, gets another stoppage. And, he's got a bright future. There's a lot of fights we can look at for him now. What's next? He's still young. He's got to develop. We're already hyping up the Olympic rematch from 2021 with Keyshawn Davis. That could have happened. But like I said last time on Thursday, that's not a fight that should happen yet. That's a fight of two guys that could be at the top of the weight class one day at one point in time. Let them build themselves up to have that mega fight then. It has a chance to be so much bigger than it would be right now. So let that just kind of continue to grow. Let Andy Cruz and let Keyshawn Davis develop themselves and continue to win their fights and rise up the ranking set. The fullness of what could be that mega fight in the future unfolds in, maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now. So that's the breakdown of the Riyadh season card in LA. I got a couple other things I want to touch up on before I wrap up this show now, though. There was a fight that Turkey proposed, saying he would like to have happen. And we all saw it was a very big deal. Shakur Stevenson was sitting ringside, and we saw him talking with Turkey. And it appears, I know he said he hasn't made his decision yet. It seems quite clear that Eddie Hearn's now representing him, and that would be good. I think I like that. Either Hearn or Floyd, I think both those would work out fine. But Turkey made it clear that he wants William Zepeda versus Shakur Stevenson. I like that fight. First big mega name for Shakur Stevenson we really get to see him be tested in. Way too early prediction, Shakur Stevenson's going to win that fight. The thing about Shakur Stevenson that people don't recognize, boxing is not just about the damaging aspect of what you do. It is a technically sound sport. If you don't break it down and understand it, you're not going to understand the fullness of it. And there is not a fighter today that is as good on the defensive end as Shakur Stevenson is. It is going to be almost impossible to beat him. There is one guy that I think has a chance of doing it. That is Tank Davis. Outside of Tank Davis, I don't think somebody's going to win against Shakur Stevenson in 12 rounds. Now, the fact is Shakur a massive box office draw from the standpoint of entertainment? Probably not. Obviously, I know he's not going to get a lot of knockouts. He's not going to be a guy that does those. Now, could he do it? We've seen it before, sure, but he's become so dominant on the defensive end that he's not going to go, engage in that aspect, most likely. He still was trading shots in his last fight a little bit, but Shakur Stevenson is phenomenal. I think he wins that fight. However, this leads to a massive question. And I mentioned the one guy that I think has a chance of beating Shakur Stevenson. Where is he going to fight next? Tank Davis just came off a pretty good win. Obviously, it took a little bit over a year off from boxing for multiple reasons there. But he's back. He made a statement against Frank Martin. All right, where's the big fight? And that's what everyone's been questioning. When is Tank going to fight the next big fighter? And we all want to see that unfold. he is spectacular. He's elite. I don't think it's not a matter of, is he good to do it? And I think we just want to see the big fights happen and be entertaining. And so, well, we had all the things planned out for his first mega fight was going to happen against Lomachenko. That seemed to be as close to a lock as you get for later this year. And then Lomachenko decides to pull out of that fight and say, I'm going to take time to recover and be with family and he'll fight next year, whatever that whole thing was. And then we see him at the fight this past weekend and he's trash talking Shakur and almost like, could those guys maybe fight now? No, I don't think it is. But so I don't even know what's going on with Lomachenko, but that fight appears to be over. If what Turki Al-Shanki said on Saturday night that he wants Shakur and Zepeda to fight next, well, then those two guys in that weight group are effectively out of position. Then they're not going to be guys that Tank could fight. And so then you look at a couple other guys that are, within Tank's weight class or a weight class up or so. And you say, well, two guys that at one point, maybe you say as of the one guy on my list, 3 nights ago, or you list another guy that a few months ago don't make sense anymore. That's Pitbull Cruz. A rematch there was possible. And then Matias, everybody saw this was the guy, no stop Matias. This guy was going to knock out everybody. Then Liam Parra comes in and he beats him, dethrones him. And now it's like, okay, well, that makes no sense for Tank either. So he's not fighting Pitbull or Matias. Most likely doesn't make much sense. And then you talk about another good guy, and that's Ryan Garcia, who is suspended. Can't fight him now until April 20th. So Ryan Garcia's off the table. So then you really look at this group. Who is Tank really going to be able to fight next? The list isn't that long. So I almost say, if you're Tank, just take a, say, busy fight if you need to. But you have to figure something out, whatever he really wants to do, because I don't think the fans can really fault him on this aspect for not having a mega fight if it doesn't come to fruition next. Because there's not a lot of guys that Tank can just go out there and fight at this point. The names, I created a 4-name guys, and a couple of these really aren't even that big of a deal. But one, sure, this is probably the biggest one you can name, is Devin Haney. Could that fight happen? Yeah. But I don't know if now is the best time for that to happen. Devin Haney just had a massive beatdown. Is he 100% healthy even now? When is he going to be healthy to be able to fight? We just saw him at the fight night on Saturday. I don't know when he's going to be healthy to fight and be able to get back at it. Not doubting his talent. I hope he's okay 100% again. And is he healthy? When can they even do that fight? And so that would be an interesting fight. Also, is coming off an essential, everyone's going to debate it. I'll just say this. Obviously, Devin Haney lost technically the fight, but truthfully, he didn't. Ryan Garcia obviously did cheat. So we can't go around the cut corners there. But from a psychological aspect, fans did see Haney lose. And so a lot of people will say, well, he's not as good. And so there's a lot of excuse then. Does Tank just beat up on a guy that's not that good or something like that? And I don't know if that's what Tank's looking for. So I don't know if that fight makes sense now, but that is one of the few possibilities. Rayo, that one might make a lot more sense. Obviously, Pitbull was the rumored guy that you could make a Pitbull versus Tank for number 2. Pitbull's off the table now. Rayo steps up. Could that make sense? It's a belt fight still. It's a chance to go fight a guy that's very, very talented. We just saw put on an absolute clinic and masterclass on Pitbull Cruz. That one I legitimately could see happening. And then we have a couple other guys, Parra. That could happen. Is it the biggest box office fight? No, but it is a belt fight. You could go fight him. You could also go fight Dennis, who also just got a championship. He's got a belt. You could potentially go and fight him. Once again, it's not the biggest box office draw, but the thing is that what is next for Tank? I like the opportunity of Shakur. Now, here's the dream scenario I got for you guys. I would love to see Tank for Shakur, but I don't think anyone would stop either one of those two dudes. I just don't think it. And one of the guys, sorry, I just realized I forget, is you also have Teofimo Lopez. That is a possibility for Tank to fight as well. I forgot that name. My apologies. But Lopez could obviously be a guy that Tank fights. That would be a big box office draw. It could make sense, and we'll see what happens there. But what I see, though, is nobody's defeating Shakur or Tank outside of those two, right? Those are the two top guys in the weight classes that could possibly match up there. And so what I say is, okay, if we can get Shakur to have 2 belts, we have Tank to get a couple of the belts, and you have a undisputed fight for those two in Las Vegas, in America, between 2 American guys getting undisputed championship of the world, that would be a mega fight. And we're talking about 2 guys that you have the most dominant, persistent, powerful guy, pound for pound powerful guy, I should say, in Tank, who also is very good defensively. But then you're fighting the best defensive fighter in the entire world, in my opinion. That is a fight I would love to see happen. I would be a big fan of, but I think if we could let that kind of fester and develop for a little bit and we get that fight, summertime next year, fall of next year, where this is an undisputed fight. I think that's the fight we would love to see have happen. I would be all for that. And I think it's realistic. Like I said, I don't think Tank's losing to anybody except for possibly Shakur. And I don't think Shakur's losing to anybody except for possibly Tank. Those are the two top guys. And nobody, I don't think, is going to beat them until they meet each other in the ring. And one of those two guys will happen to fall, and we'll see what happens there. So that's what I got in regards to those fights. But it is something to keep an eye on. What is Tank Davis going to do next? Nobody really has an idea right now, because a lot of these things are moving, a lot of moving pieces, and things aren't coming to fruition for Tank right now, because a lot of these guys are suspended, are hurt, just lost, have fights already scheduled and lined up, or are just completely ducking him, as in Lomachenko. So we'll have to see what ends up unfolding there. But that's what I've got today for you guys on Combat Currents, which is a weekly or a daily show where I'll be breaking down and unmasking combat currents of today's fight world. So with that being said, I appreciate each and every single person who tuned into today's episode of the SchuZ Show at this late night edition. We're just about 14 minutes away from midnight Eastern time. And I appreciate everybody that tuned in today to enjoy this late night edition of the SchuZ Show. I will be back on Thursday, most likely at the usual time, but things could obviously happen and unfold there, and may or may not have a guest. We'll see. Obviously working on a few things there, but I appreciate everyone for tuning in once again, and I'll see you guys on Thursday. You guys have a great rest of your night, or whenever you guys listen, have a great rest of your day. God bless you guys all, and I'll talk to you guys on Thursday.